You slip away from the soft-lit court just before dawn, the salt pyramid still glistening in the early mist. You're on the road again, but this time you're headed for the edge of the empire, where the economy loses its velvet gloves and starts to look a bit, well, crustier. Welcome to the salt black market. It's not quite as dramatic as you'd expect. No shady trench coats or whispered deals behind taverns, but the stakes are high and the rules are murky. You ride with a merchant caravan that isn't officially breaking the law, but let's just say they aren't declaring every brick either. Salt is a heavy thing, literally and politically. When a resource is valuable, portable, and edible, it tends to invite all sorts of creative accounting, especially when imperial taxes are steep and border officers have suspiciously nice sandals. Your fellow traders chuckle as you pass one such checkpoint, casually slipping a single brick of salt to the guard who winks and lets your camels through without inspection. It's not even subtle. It's just how things work here. Amole as currency, tax, gift, and bribe, all at once. Historians still argue whether this informal system of salt tipping was corruption or just a culturally accepted fee. Some say it greased the wheels of commerce. Others say it eroded imperial control. Either way, it worked. For now. The landscape changes as you move eastward. Lush hills give way to dusty valleys and wide, salty plains. Here, the salt trade becomes even more unpredictable. Small-time smugglers move at night, slipping across provincial lines with baskets hidden beneath grain sacks. Others create convincing fake amole from clay coated in real salt shavings. They don't last long, literally. One humid day and your fake fortune crumbles like stale bread. But the real drama, that lives in the tension between regions. See, not every area was equally blessed with natural salt sources. The Danakil Depression in the northeast, where the Afar people carved salt from the cracked earth, was the undisputed heavyweight. But getting that salt into the Empire's highlands involved days, sometimes weeks, of grueling caravan travel. And each region the salt passed through added its own taxes, tolls, or hospitality fees. So traders began to bypass certain checkpoints. They forged permits, bribed local chiefs, and invented cousins in high places. One rumor floating through the caravan is about a woman who stitched an entire fake salt invoice into her tunic hem, claiming she was a tax official's daughter. She wasn't, but her acting skills earned her 3 free nights and safe passage, until someone noticed the ink was water-soluble. It's not just shady traders bending the rules. Local officials, too, sometimes redirected salt for emergencies, which conveniently aligned with their niece's wedding or their craving for salted goat stew. And the imperial court, hundreds of miles away, often had no idea what really happened at these fringes. By the time a complaint reached the capital, if it ever did, the guilty party had usually retired or changed names. One particularly odd case you hear involves a monastery accused of hoarding salt under the guise of religious preservation. When inspectors arrived, they found rows of perfectly stacked amole, each tagged with biblical verses and surrounded by beeswax candles. The monks swore it was part of an ancient ritual. The inspectors, perhaps spooked by divine consequences, left without touching a brick. And let's not forget the salt pirates. No ships involved, just gangs of armed riders who raided slow-moving caravans. Their tactics were clever. Ambushes near river crossings, decoy traders who led the real ones astray, and the occasional salt heist in which entire camel trains were rerouted overnight. It's said one group became so successful they began issuing their own salt bonds, promising future delivery for a cut of the loot. But all this underground trading created a feedback loop. The more salt was siphoned from official routes, the more the government cracked down. Laws grew stricter, patrols increased, salt markings became standardized. Some rulers even tried stamping royal seals into a mole, hoping to prevent counterfeits, though most traders just scraped them off to avoid awkward questions. Ironically, this chaos birthed new forms of trust. In regions where law enforcement was thin and scams were thick, reputations became currency. A trader who always delivered the right weight, never watered down their salt, and remembered your mother's birthday? Priceless. In some areas, merchants were followed not by guards, but by poets who sang their praises as walking Yelp reviews. Salt smugglers weren't always hardened criminals either. You meet a young boy who works with his grandmother smuggling bricks hidden in baskets of dried fish. They're saving up for a new donkey cart. They don't think of it as crime, it's tradition. Her family's been doing this since before the emperor wore shoes. All this gray market activity might sound like a system on the brink of collapse. But it wasn't. In fact, it's kind of beautiful in a dusty, morally complicated way. The black market was flexible. It responded faster than imperial policy. It adapted to weather, war, rumor, and whim. It whispered where the empire roared. And while the emperor may have frowned upon salt evasion, even he knew the value of keeping certain traders happy. It's whispered that one of his cousins ran a parallel route disguised as a religious pilgrimage, collecting off-the-books bricks for imperial rainy day funds. By the time you bed down under the stars, wrapped in a wool blanket that smells faintly of goat and spice, you start to realize just how porous borders can be when salt's involved. It's not just a mineral, it's movement, it's memory. It's the quiet hum of necessity. Soon you'll return to the source, to the places where the salt was born, not in palaces or markets, but from ancient earth carved by hand, brick by sacred brick. The sun rises over a horizon that seems made entirely of glinting glass and baked stone. You're finally here, at the source. The great salt pans of the Danakil Depression, one of the hottest places on Earth, stretch before you like a scorched mirror. It's not an easy place to love. The air shimmers with heat, the ground crunches with every step, and the wind, when it bothers to blow, smells faintly of metal and ash. But to the Afar people, this place isn't a wasteland. It's a workshop, a lifeline, a sacred tradition etched into the earth with hands rough from generations of chiseling salt. You squint at the horizon and see them, men with wooden tools and practiced postures, slowly carving the earth into rough rectangular slabs. These aren't random shapes. They're amole, salt bricks, measured carefully, shaped to be money. This is the salt's birthplace. You crouch beside one of the workers and he hands you a chisel worn smooth by years of repetition. You try carving one yourself. Bad idea. The block cracks unevenly and you're gently but firmly told to just watch. Which is fair. You probably weren't built for high-stakes geology in 100-degree heat. Each brick must be just right. Flat, firm, and free of major impurities. Imperfections aren't just cosmetic. They reduce the brick's market value and may even insult a buyer if you're not careful. You wouldn't hand someone a wrinkled coin, the carver mutters with a smirk, wiping sweat from his brow. This craft is a mix of rhythm and reverence. Each swing of the chisel is guided by muscle memory. Workers sing as they move, short call and response chants that help keep time and morale. Some of these songs are said to be centuries old, passed down like lullabies made of salt and sunburn. Historians still argue whether these carving traditions are pre-Aksumite or later developments from the Solomonic era. What's clear is that they've endured, weathered like the bricks themselves but still holding shape. Once cut, the bricks are stacked to dry further under the sun. Then comes the delicate part, packing. Salt is brittle and travel is rough. Each brick is wrapped in woven palm fronds or goatskin, padded with straw, and packed onto camels in tight bundles that sway like sleeping infants. Your caravan guide, an Afar elder named Bashir, explains the loading ritual. Each camel must carry an even number of bricks, always even. Odd numbers are considered unlucky, possibly cursed. You don't question it. You just adjust the load and keep your fingers crossed. The camels complain, of course. They're professionals, but no one likes carrying a mineral that doubles as a blunt weapon. They groan, snort, and spit their disapproval as the train begins its slow crawl across the flats. Travel from the salt mines to the markets can take days or even weeks depending on rain, regional politics, and how many camels you've got that aren't holding grudges. But Bashir's crew knows the way. They follow invisible paths etched in memory, resting under acacia trees and navigating by stars and salt veins. Along the way, you stop at makeshift trading posts, little more than stone circles and tired goats. Local farmers meet the caravans here, bartering grain, honey, or livestock for fresh bricks. These are the microtransactions of empire. Nothing fancy, just survival. You watch a toothless woman trade a clay pot of milk for a single amole. She holds it in both hands like a newborn, tapping it gently to test for cracks. Satisfied, she nods and disappears into her hut, where she'll likely store it beneath the floor mat, just in case the cattle market crashes. Salt in these villages is more than money. It's a hedge against hunger, a dowry for marriage, a gift for the spirits. Babies are blessed with it. Wounds are cleaned with it. Arguments are settled over it, sometimes with more shouting than trading. It's not all sacred, of course. Sometimes the miners joke about cursed salt, bricks that bring nothing but bad luck. One supposedly caused 3 divorces and a collapsed goat pen, before being thrown into a river, never to be seen again. But most of the time, salt here is treated with understated reverence. Bashir tells you that the salt has memory, that it carries the weight of those who carved it, those who carried it, and those who paid for their futures with it. You nod, unsure if he's being poetic or literal. Either way, you believe him. As night falls over the desert, you lie beside a fire crackling with tamarind branches, the bricks stacked nearby like pale treasure. A few traders hum softly while Bashir sharpens his chisel, preparing for tomorrow's work. You think back to the court. Its painted banners, its scented tents, its whispering nobles. And now you see the other end of the thread. Salt isn't just currency, it's connection. Between earth and empire, miner and monarch, sweat and silver. Soon you'll follow these bricks again, this time along the routes they travel across borders, deserts, and years. You'll see how salt moved not just within Ethiopia, but outward, shifting power, shaping alliances, and occasionally causing full-blown diplomatic salt crises. You awaken to the sound of camel bells, low and lulling, like someone tapping a spoon on a copper bowl very, very gently. Bashir's already up, of course, tightening straps and inspecting salt bundles with a suspicious eye, as if they might run off on their own. Today, you follow the old routes, paths not marked on maps, but well worn into history by feet, hooves, and the long patience of traders. These are the arteries of salt, pulsing outward from the Danicle like veins from a heart. Some lead north to the Red Sea coast, others west to the highland cities, and a few, those reserved for the most ambitious, snake toward distant kingdoms beyond Ethiopia's borders. Your route veers toward one of those ambitious ones. You're heading to the frontier where Ethiopian salt crossed into neighboring kingdoms and sparked more than just business. It triggered negotiations, rivalries, and the occasional passive-aggressive border skirmish. You pass through low brushlands where the grass whispers underfoot, and up into misty highlands where cool air wraps around you like wet linen. Along the way, traders talk. Oh, do they talk? Stories bloom like desert flowers. There's the tale of the salt brick used to pay a magician who made it disappear, then blamed spiritual absorption. Or the man who stacked amale under his bed and woke to find his goats had eaten half his fortune. You file that one away. Never store wealth near livestock. But even more curious than the stories are the laws. Each region you pass through seems to have its own quirky relationship with salt. In one area, it's illegal to sell more than 10 bricks per transaction. In another, all salt must be blessed by a local elder before sale. Failure to do so allegedly causes crop failure and suspicious boils. Historians still argue whether these rules were meant to control trade or to assert local autonomy against imperial influence. After all, if salt is money, then making rules about salt is, well, a kind of power move. Your next stop is a frontier town near what today would be the Eritrean border. Here, the salt trade becomes international. Traders from the Ethiopian Empire meet merchants from the Saho and Tigray communities, and even further afield. A multi-salt cultural exchange, if you will. The market hums with low energy. Not bustling, not sleepy, just deliberate. Camels groan, children giggle, and you overhear a haggling session that lasts 3 full hours and ends in an exchange of precisely 13 bricks, 2 chickens, and a very offended rooster. Salt here is heavier, not just in weight, but in implications. It's wrapped in layers of diplomacy. One trader tells you, sotto voce, that the Sultan of a nearby territory once tried to corner the salt market by secretly funding a caravan syndicate. The empire didn't like that. A quiet crackdown followed. Nothing too flashy. Just a few missing caravans, some suspiciously generous imperial tax audits, and suddenly the Sultan had fewer camels than cousins. The cross-border flow of salt wasn't just tolerated, it was encouraged, selectively. Ethiopian rulers understood that letting salt move outward helped spread their economic influence. Even if they couldn't control the entire trade, they could shape its tone. Think soft power. But with brine, one particularly high-stakes example still whispered about involves a shipment of unusually pure salt destined for a northern kingdom. So pure it was considered holy. It was intended as a gift, an offering of peace after a minor territorial dispute. But somewhere along the way, the bricks were accidentally replaced with lower-grade ones. Whether it was sabotage or just laziness remains unclear, but the insult was taken seriously. The king receiving the salt sent back a scathing poem and a single cracked mole in return. No one declared war, but trade between the two sides froze for nearly a decade. Still, even in these tense moments, the salt kept flowing. Smugglers took over where officials stumbled. A sort of shadow diplomacy formed, handled not by ambassadors in robes, but by camel drivers and salt cutters who understood that peace was often easier to carry than war. As your caravan climbs into the last ridge before descending toward the border outpost, you find yourself beside an old man named Weld. He's a historian of sorts, a salt historian, which is to say, a very niche breed. He tells you of a brief moment in the 15th century when salt was used to ransom hostages during a minor royal feud. The amount? 400 bricks. Enough to buy a small town. Weldy chuckles. I'd say the hostages weren't worth more than 300, but politics is expensive. Welda's favorite story, though, is about the Great Salt Pact, a now-forgotten agreement between 3 mountain tribes that banned salt-based curses. Apparently, the practice had gotten out of hand. One elder accused another of spiritually salting his cattle to make them wander off cliffs. The treaty ended such accusations and declared that salt must never be weaponized. At least, not spiritually. You wonder aloud how seriously people took that kind of thing. Welde shrugs. Depends how many cows you've got and how far they fell. As evening falls, you reach a rocky outpost manned by a few drowsy guards and a goat with an unsettling stare. They ask no questions as your caravan passes. Everyone knows what's in the bundles. No one says the word. It's like salt has become sacred again, or taboo, or simply obvious. You sleep that night under a star-hungry sky, listening to the clink of bricks being quietly unloaded. Somewhere beyond the hills, these bricks will find new homes. Buried, bartered, treasured, or dissolved into stew. And tomorrow you'll see what happens when this trade, so old, so tactile, so heavy, brushes against the modernizing ambitions of an empire trying to tax everything it sees.